Jace arrived at Outpost A-17 just after sunset. The twin moons of the alien planet hung low in the sky, lighting up the ground with a soft silver glow. It was his first assignment outside Earth's territory, and he was excited, but the moment he stepped inside the base, something felt off. The air was heavy, like the walls were holding in a secret. The base commander, a tall alien with dark green skin and sharp golden eyes, greeted him with a firm nod. "Human, listen carefully," the commander said, voice low. "And serious, you are to avoid any contact with the female of our warrior caste, Kishara." Jace blinked, confused. "Why? Did I do something wrong?" The commander shook his head. "It's not you, it's the season. She is entering the pairing up phase. You must not be alone with her. Do not touch her. And above all," he paused, "lock your door at night." Jace gave a half smile, trying to lighten the mood. "You make it sound like she's dangerous." "She is," the commander replied without emotion, "especially to those she chooses." Jace had read about the pairing rituals of the Varaxi species, but he didn't pay much attention. It sounded like mating season for animals. It's not a real threat. Besides, Kishara looked calm when he first saw her. She was tall for her kind, with smooth blue-gray skin, short silver hair, and eyes that glowed faintly like starlight. She glanced at him but said nothing, her face cold and unreadable. The first night, Jace settled into his room on the east wing of the outpost. The wind outside made strange whistling sounds, like distant voices calling through the corridors. He unpacked, set up his small communication screen, and reviewed base protocols. Everything felt normal until the lights flickered twice. He glanced at the door panel and realized he forgot to lock it. With a sigh, he stood to fix it. But just then, a shadow passed by his doorway. He froze, heart thudding. The shadow paused, then backed up. Kishara stood in the hallway, silently staring at him. No expression, no words, just that glowing stare. "Hey," Jace said, trying not to sound nervous. She didn't reply, but she tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something far away. Then, slowly, she turned and walked away. The next morning, Jace brought it up with one of the other engineers, a small furry alien named Loken. "She stood at my door last night," Jace whispered. She didn't say anything. Loken's fur bristled, and he looked around nervously. "You forgot the lock?" "Yeah, I fixed it after she left. You're lucky she didn't step inside," Loken said in a low voice. "Once she crosses the threshold, it starts." "What starts?" "The bond," Loken said, eyes wide. "She chooses one mate each cycle, and once chosen, nothing breaks it." Jace laughed, unsure whether to believe him. But Loken didn't laugh back. Later that day, during a systems check, Jace saw Kishara again. She stood near the power coils, her back to him, motionless. When he walked past her, she turned her head just slightly, following him with her eyes. No words, no movement, just watching. It felt like a silent warning, or maybe something worse. That evening, Jace sat in his room, staring at the blinking lock-engaged light. He triple-checked it, then pulled his blanket tighter. He thought about the commander's words, about the strange glow in Kishara's eyes. Outside, the wind screamed like something alive. He turned off the lights and tried to sleep. But hours later, he woke up, heart racing. Something was wrong. He felt it. He sat up, looked at the door. Was still locked, but under the narrow space between the door and floor, there was a shadow, unmoving. Someone was standing outside. He didn't move, didn't breathe. The shadow stayed for what felt like forever. Then it moved away, slow and silent, like it had never been there. Jace lay back down, his heart still pounding. This time, he didn't sleep, and somewhere deep in the outpost, a whisper echoed through the dark halls. A whisper in a language only a Varaxi would understand. But if translated, it would say one thing: he is the one. Jace didn't speak about the shadow the next morning. He told himself it could have been anything, a trick of the dim hallway lights, maybe even his own fear playing games. But when he walked into the control room, Kishara was already there, standing beside the central console. Her back was turned, but the moment he stepped inside, she turned slowly and looked straight at him. Her eyes were brighter than before, glowing softly. Like embers in the dark, he stopped mid-step, unsure if he should nod, wave, or pretend not to notice. She blinked once, slowly, then turned back around and said nothing, but her presence filled the room like thick smoke. Impossible to ignore, Jace tried to act normal. Checking system logs, reading temperature charts, fixing a jammed data cable, but he could feel her eyes on him, not always staring, just watching. He finished early and left without saying a word, hoping she wouldn't follow. But when he returned to the dining hall an hour later, she was already there too, sitting alone. There were other aliens around, but none sat near her. She looked up only once when he picked up his food tray and gave the smallest tilt of her head. It wasn't a greeting neat, felt more like an invitation. Loken pulled him aside before bed, whispering with real fear in his voice, "She has chosen." "No way," Jace muttered. "I haven't even spoken to her." "You don't have to," Loken said. "She watched you, stood at your door, followed your scent. You think that's nothing?" Jace wanted to argue, wanted to laugh. But something in Loken's eyes made the words stick in his throat. The engineer leaned closer, voice trembling. "Lock your door tonight." Human, and this time, don't forget, that night, Jace didn't forget. He locked the door, then double-checked it, and even placed a heavy storage case in front of it for good measure. Still, he couldn't sleep. He lay on his bed with the lights off, eyes wide open, listening to every creak and shift in the structure. Outside, the wind whispered again, but this time it wasn't just noise. It almost sounded like a hum, soft and steady, a rhythm too perfect to be natural. It was coming from the hallway. Right outside his door, he sat up, barely breathing. Then it stopped, for a full minute. There was only silence. Then the doorknob twitched. Just once, the lock held, but the shadow returned, resting quietly beneath the crack in the door. Jace sat frozen, staring at it, wondering if she could hear his heartbeat pounding in the dark. The shadow didn't move for a long time. Then, just as slowly as before, it disappeared. Jace stayed awake the rest of the night, not out of fear, but something else, something he didn't want to name yet. Not even in his own thoughts, morning came like a slap to the senses, and Jace went straight to the medbay. He pulled the assistant medic aside and asked what exactly happened during this pairing phase. The medic, a pale creature with 6 eyes and careful hands, looked troubled. For her kind, the bond is ancient, sacred, and chemical. "But I haven't touched her," Jace said, frustrated. "I haven't done anything." "You didn't have to," the medic said gently. "She's doing it all, and she's stronger than you think." Jace walked back to his room later that day, only to find something left at his door. A small object carved from bone or maybe shell, shaped like a spiral and etched with markings. He picked it up carefully, unsure what it meant. Loken passed behind him, saw it, and gasped. "She gave you a mating token," he whispered, stepping back. "She's already claimed you." "No," Jace muttered. "This isn't happening." But deep inside, a small part of him wondered why did he feel more confused than afraid. That night, Jace sat at the edge of his bed, the spiral token resting on the table beside him. He locked the door again, as always, but his hand hovered over the lock button for a second too long. He pressed it, then sat down, eyes never leaving. The token, outside, the humming returned, slower now, softer, almost like a lullaby. And in the hallway, The footsteps stopped once more outside his door, but this time she didn't knock. She simply waited. Silent and still, and Jace alone. In the dark, found himself asking a dangerous question. What if I opened it? The spiral token stayed on Jace's table all day. He tried to ignore it, tried to pretend it meant nothing. But every time he looked away, his eyes were pulled back. Like the markings moved slightly when he wasn't looking, like it was. Waiting, he asked the base AI if there was any record on Varaxi bonding rituals. The AI returned only one restricted file. Sealed under species diplomacy codes, he bypassed the encryption anyway. Inside, he found blurry video logs, images of human crew members paired with Varaxi warriors. Some looked peaceful, some disturbed, and one ended with a loud scream and static. Jace closed the file quickly, his fingers shaking just a little. Kishara didn't appear at morning check-in. The commander didn't ask. And nobody said her name. The crew had grown quiet. The air, thick, like it was full of unsaid words. Loken avoided his eyes. And the other aliens moved out of his way in the corridors. Even the food dispenser glitched when he pressed the button, dropping a half-frozen meal on his tray. It was like the base itself had started rejecting him. Later, while inspecting the water filtration unit, he felt someone behind him, not footsteps, just heat. He turned slowly and saw her, Kishara, crouched like a predator in the shadowed hallway. She didn't move, didn't speak, but she wasn't just watching this time. She was listening. To his breath, to his heartbeat, maybe even to his fear. He didn't run. Instead, he stood there and asked softly, "Why me?" Kishara tilted her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "In my blood," you answered. Then she turned and vanished like smoke, leaving him frozen with her words still echoing inside him. That night, Jace sat with the spiral in his hand. He traced the lines, felt warmth beneath his fingers. It didn't feel like bone anymore, it felt alive. Pulsing faintly like a second heartbeat, he placed it down and stared at the door. Still locked, but something in him had changed. Not surrender, not yet, but curiosity. The kind that pulls a man toward danger, not away from it. He remembered Earth stories. Myths of sirens, wolves in the woods, creatures who whispered your name and waited for you to come closer. Kishara didn't whisper, not with words. But her silence spoke louder than any scream. That night, she didn't come to his door. No humming, no footsteps, just silence. And somehow, that was worse. He couldn't sleep, couldn't sit still. His hand hovered over the lock switch again. The temptation burning behind his eyes, but he didn't press it. Not yet. At dawn, the emergency alarm wailed through the outpost. All crew members rushed to the east wing except Kishara. Jace found her room empty, her gear gone. He felt something sink in his chest. A strange hollow ache he didn't want to name. The storm shield on the outer wall had failed. A maintenance drone had gone missing in the high winds, and they needed someone to find it. Before anyone spoke, Jace volunteered. The commander raised a brow but said nothing, just nodded once. He geared up and stepped into the storm alone, and far off, beyond the howling wind and flashing sky, he saw her silhouette standing near the ridge, not running, not lost, waiting, and he walked toward her without thinking, without fear. Without locking any doors behind him. The storm screamed around him, tearing at his suit. Jace could barely see 10 meters ahead, but he kept walking. Each step felt heavier, like the wind wanted to turn him back. But she was out there, he knew. It not lost, not wandering, just there, his visor fogged. But he refused to wipe it. If he blinked too long, he might miss her. Then, through the spinning dust and snow, he saw her again. Kishara stood still on the ridge, arms lowered, face uncovered. The wind blew her hair like silver flames behind her head. She didn't seem to feel the cold. He reached her, breathing hard. "Why are you here?" He shouted, his voice barely a whisper against the storm. She turned her head slowly, her eyes glowing like twin stars. "You came," she said, "and nothing more." Then she walked past him. Moving toward the edge of the storm line, Jace followed. Unsure why, unsure of anything, the drone they came for was buried in snow nearby, still flashing its location beacon. But she didn't care about the drone, and neither did he anymore. They moved together, side by side, not touching, not speaking, but something passed between them, silent and strong. Like a current under the ice, they reached a rock outcrop and ducked beneath it. A quiet place shielded from the wind. Jace dropped to one knee, catching his breath. Kishara sat across from him, her hands on her knees, her face unreadable. He looked at her closely for the first time, not as a threat, not as a puzzle, but as someone. Real. Her breathing was slow, calm. He realized then that she'd been waiting not just here in the storm, but longer. "Why?" he asked. "Why me?" She tilted her head again, but this time she answered, "You do not fear me." Jace frowned. "I didn't know I was supposed to." She nodded once, like that meant everything. Then, slowly, she removed a small cloth. From around her wrist, inside was another spiral, this one darker. With red lines running through it like veins, she placed it between them in the snow. "The bond can be broken," she said, her voice steady. Jace looked at the token. Then, at her. "What happens if I don't break it?" Kishara didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't move. "You become part of me," she said. "And I become part of you." Jace stared at the spiral, unsure if he should feel fear. But all he felt was warmth despite the cold, despite the wind still roaring above them. He didn't reach for the token, not yet. Instead, he asked her something strange, something human. "Do you dream?" Kishara blinked. "Once, slowly, I did," she said, "before the bond, before you." The words sank deep into the air between them. Not a confession, not a threat, just truth. Something ancient inside her had changed, and she didn't hide it. He realized then she wasn't trying to trap him. She was giving him a choice back at the base. The alarm stopped, and the wind eased. The storm was ending, but something else had started. Jace stood, walked to her, and sat beside her in the silence. Neither of them spoke again, not that day, not in words. But their shadows touched in the snow, and neither one pulled away. They returned to the outpost just before dusk. No one asked where they had gone. No one needed to. Jace walked past the others like a ghost. Quiet, changed, and Kishara followed. Not behind him, not beside him, but near, always near, inside. His room, the spiral still lay on the table. Now it looked different to him. Not strange, not alien, but something he recognized. Like it had been waiting for him long before he ever arrived. He sat beside it and stared for a long time. Outside, the wind had gone still. The silence felt heavier than the storm. Later, he found himself in the tech lab, hands working on a translator. Upgrade he didn't need. He needed a distraction, something to push away the question echoing louder in his mind. Was this real? Or was it just biology, chemicals, instincts wrapped in ritual? He didn't know, and part of him didn't care anymore. Kishara entered the lab without a sound. Her eyes scanned the room, then landed on him. She didn't speak. Not at first, but she walked to the console beside him and placed a small object. Down, it was a piece of her armor, bent and broken from the storm. She pushed it toward him gently. "A piece of me," she said. "Why?" he asked, not moving. She looked down, her voice quiet. "Because you gave me none of you, yet I feel full." The lights flickered once. And Jace stood, facing her fully. Her body was tense, still holding back, like a soldier trained not to fall, but her hands shook just slightly. She wasn't afraid of him, she was afraid of his choice. He stepped forward, not touching her, not crossing the line. But he let the silence between them break. "I don't understand everything about your people," he said. "Or what this means to you." Kishara met his eyes. "Neither do I. But," he added, voice low, "I don't want you to hurt, and I don't want to leave." Her shoulders eased for the first time, like a weight had fallen off her back. They sat together in the dim light, her armor piece beside his translator chip. Different worlds, different symbols placed side by side. No bond was spoken, no vow was made. But something passed between them, quiet, invisible, real. That night, he didn't lock the door. Not because he forgot. Not because he was careless, but because he didn't want her to find it closed. And for the first time, she didn't come. She stayed in her own room, her own space, and Jace felt something strange. Not relief, not disappointment, but respect. Like they had stepped into something deeper than instinct, in the dark, with no sound but his own breath. Jace whispered to himself, "I chose her, not because of some alien rule or species tradition, but because when he looked into her eyes, he didn't see a warrior or a danger. He saw someone lost, like he had once been, and someone brave enough to reach out anyway." The next morning, Jace woke up early, not from alarms, not from dreams. Just a quiet feeling pulling at his chest. He sat up and stared at the open doorway. No one had come in, no one had knocked. But something felt different in the room. It was warmer, as if someone had been there and left a part of themselves behind. He stepped into the hallway, half expecting to see her waiting. But Kishara wasn't there. The corridor was empty, the outpost still asleep, but down the hall. Her scent still lingered sharp, clean, slightly metallic. He followed it like instinct. Not because he had to, but because it felt right. He found her in the greenhouse room, sitting near the heater vents. Eyes closed, body still, not meditating, not sleeping, just being. The soft glow of the grow lights danced across her skin, making her silver markings shimmer like soft lines of light. Jace didn't speak. Didn't want to break the moment. He sat beside her without a word, not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel the heat between them. Minutes passed in silence. Then she opened her eyes and looked at him. Her voice was soft, not like before, not cold or flat. "I dreamed again." Jace turned his head, surprised. "What did you see?" She looked down at her hands, fingers tracing the floor. "Fire. And water. And you, pulling me from both." He didn't know how to answer that. He wasn't sure it even needed an answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out the translator chip he had been repairing. He handed it to her gently. "It's not a bond gift," he said. "It's just something to help you understand me better." She took it, her fingers brushing his hand for a second too long. "I already understand more than I should," she whispered. Later that day, the commander called Jace into the central chamber. He didn't look pleased, his sharp golden eyes piercing through the air. "You've gone too far," the commander said. Jace didn't flinch. "I haven't broken any rule." "No," the commander replied slowly, "but the bond is active now, and the others feel it." Jace remained silent, not in shame, not in fear. He simply didn't know what to say. The commander leaned closer. "If she loses control, the consequences fall on you." Jace nodded once, then left the chamber without another word. He didn't go to his room, didn't go to the mess hall. He went straight to the one place he knew she'd be, her training chamber. Kishara was there, striking the dummy posts in silence. Her movements sharp, perfect, controlled. He watched her for a moment, then walked in without asking. She paused mid-strike, sensing him before she saw him. "I heard," she said, not turning. "Let them talk," Jace replied. Kishara finally looked back at him, eyes glowing brighter than before. "They fear what they don't understand," she said. Even I fear it sometimes. He stepped closer now. Closer than ever before. I don't, he said quietly. I just feel it. She nodded once, then turned back to her training. But this time, when she struck, her movements slowed, softer. Like she didn't want to fight anymore, like something inside her had changed. That night, she didn't wait outside. His door, she didn't come in either. She stood in the hallway as the lights dimmed, her shadow blending with the wall, and Jace. He left the door open just a little. No words were said, no decisions announced, but two silences met in the dark. And both of them listened. The lights of the outpost flickered once before dawn, not from a storm, not from a system failure, but from something no one could explain. The other crew members felt it a shift, small but deep. Like the base itself was holding its breath. Jace woke up to silence, not the heavy kind, filled with fear, but the gentle kind that comes before a change. The door to his room was wide open. He had left it like that the night before, and still, no one entered. But he felt that someone had been there, just briefly, like a shadow passing through light. Kishara wasn't in her usual places, not in the greenhouse, not the training room, not the command wing. It was like she had vanished. Jace searched quietly. Avoiding the stares of the other aliens, they didn't stop him. They didn't ask. They only watched. Like they knew something he didn't yet. He found her on the edge of the cliff behind the outpost. The snow had settled there, untouched and clean. She stood alone, her arms crossed, her back straight. When she heard him approach, she didn't turn. You should go back, she said softly. Jace stopped a few steps behind her. Why? He asked. Is it over? She didn't answer right away. Then finally, she spoke. The bond fades today. The cycle ends. My instincts return. To silence, Jace nodded slowly, the words hitting him in a place he hadn't prepared. Then you'll forget me. Kishara turned this time, her face calm but not cold. I could forget the scent, the sound of your voice, the details of your touch. But, she added, stepping closer, I cannot forget how you didn't run. The snow began to fall. Again, light and slow, she raised her hand and placed something in his palm. It was the second spiral, the darker one, the one meant to break the bond. But it was cracked now, split cleanly down the center. By custom, this should have ended us, she said. Jace looked at it, then at her. But we're still here, he whispered. Kishara nodded once. Yes. He took her hand in his, gently, without pressure, not claiming, not forcing. Just offering. She didn't pull away. Back at the base, reports buzzed about his transfer order. Earth Command had recalled him, citing unusual emotional risk. He didn't answer the message right away because something in him didn't feel finished here, not with her, not with what they had begun. Later that night, he stood alone in his room, the spiral token resting beside the broken translator chip. He stared at them both and realized they were the same now, two things that once separated them, now useless, now symbols of what had changed. He turned as the door slid open, slow and silent. Kishara stood there, not in armor, not in silence. Just herself, and this time, she stepped in without hesitation. No words, no vows. No instincts, just choice. Jace looked at her, and she looked back. Two species, two lives, once bound by rules, now walking past them. He took a deep breath, feeling the strange peace settle inside him. I'm not going back, he said. Not asking for permission, she nodded slowly, then spoke one last truth. Then stay, not as a mate, not as a bond, but as mine. Outside, the wind picked up again, but it no longer sounded like warning. It sounded like welcome.